For years, the palace endured accusations, interviews, private revelations, and public humiliation without delivering the punishment many believed was inevitable. But behind the closed doors of Buckingham Palace, King Charles finally reached the decision he had resisted as both a monarch and a father. With one signature, Harry and Meghan were stripped of every remaining royal title, and the words spoken afterward left no possibility of return. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles entered the council chamber, knowing everyone understood the cost. William stood near the table, while two constitutional advisors waited beside a leather folder marked with the Sussex names. Buckingham Palace was not merely a residence. It was the monarchy's working center, where royal decisions became official action. This was no family warning. It was a final separation. The king opened the file. Inside rested the order removing Harry and Meghan's remaining royal styles, including the Duke and Duchess of Sussex designation. A royal style is the official title and form of address recognized by the crown. Once withdrawn, it can no longer signal active royal standing. Charles read the first page twice, then looked toward William for hesitation. The prince gave him none. He had watched interviews, accusations, and private disputes spill into public life, while Catherine and their children carried the pressure. Yet William felt no triumph. His brother was about to lose the last title connecting his new life to the institution they were born to serve. Charles lifted the pen, but his hand paused. He remembered Harry as a grieving boy, a soldier, and a son who once believed the palace would always remain home. Then duty hardened the moment. He signed. In California, Harry answered a private call from a senior palace official. The message came through a recorded legal notification prepared for his representatives, leaving no confusion. He thought the call concerned security. Then the official said the titles had been withdrawn. Harry gripped the table and demanded that the sentence be repeated. Meghan entered before the call ended. She saw his face change and asked what had happened. When she heard the truth, she asked whether the order could be challenged, reversed, or delayed. Harry remained silent, because the final sentence had already destroyed that hope. Back in London, Charles closed the folder. His voice was low, but the words struck harder than any proclamation. No more Duke and Duchess. And before Harry could decide how to fight back, Meghan asked the question that would drive the crisis deeper. Who had finally convinced the king to do it? For years, the palace endured accusations, interviews, private revelations, and public humiliation without delivering the punishment many believed was inevitable. But behind the closed doors of Buckingham Palace, King Charles finally reached the decision he had resisted as both a monarch and a father. With one signature, Harry and Meghan were stripped of every remaining royal title, and the words spoken afterward left no possibility of return. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles entered the council chamber without speaking. William stood by the table as constitutional advisors, and the Lord Chancellor waited beside a leather folder marked with the Sussex names. The Lord Chancellor is the senior government official who advises on law and state authority. His presence made the truth unavoidable. This was not an angry family gesture. It was a formal act built to survive challenge. Years of conflict had driven the monarchy here. Televised interviews had exposed private wounds. A memoir had turned family arguments into headlines. Accusations of cruelty had placed royals under suspicion. Still, the king delayed permanent action because Harry was his son, and each postponement preserved one hope that the relationship might be repaired. Charles opened the folder. The order removed Harry and Meghan's remaining royal titles, including the Duke and Duchess of Sussex styling. A royal styling is the official name and form of address recognized by the crown. Once withdrawn, it could no longer suggest royal standing or a continuing institutional role. The king lifted the pen, then stopped. William watched his father's expression tighten but did not interrupt. The prince understood that this signature would do more than settle a constitutional dispute. It would force the monarch to admit that the bond he had tried to preserve had collapsed. Charles signed. In California, Harry answered a call from a palace official, and assumed a security arrangement was being discussed. Then the official read from a legal notification, "The titles have been withdrawn." Harry gripped the table and demanded that the sentence be repeated. Meghan entered before the call ended. She saw her husband's face change, heard that Charles had personally approved the final language, and asked whether the decision could be challenged. Harry remained silent. Back in London, the king closed the folder. No more Duke and Duchess. Meghan demanded to know who had pushed him beyond hesitation. One name rose above every other: William. But the signature was only the visible ending. The deeper wound lay in what each member of the family believed had been stolen from them long before the king ever lifted that pen. The royal titles carried prestige, history, and influence, but the battle surrounding them was never truly about ceremonial names. For Charles, the decision represented the failure of a father who could no longer protect his son from consequence. For Harry, it felt like the final proof that blood meant less than the institution. And for Meghan, the loss threatened the identity upon which an entirely new public life had been built. Charles remained alone after the signing, his eyes fixed on an old photograph of Harry as a child. Advisors had pressed him for months, yet the king resisted, because removing the Sussex titles would humiliate his son before the world, and make reconciliation almost impossible. The Sussex titles were formal royal names linking Harry and Meghan to a dukedom, a rank traditionally granted by the sovereign. To strip them away was to remove the last public symbol connecting their separate life to the crown. Camilla entered quietly and noticed the photograph before she noticed the unsigned notes beside it. She understood at once that his firmness had concealed grief. The queen consort told him mercy without boundaries had become another form of damage. Charles answered that Harry would call the decision abandonment. She reminded him that William, Catherine, and their children had also paid for every delay. Harry moved from disbelief into anger. He told Meghan that the palace had erased his birth, military service, and family loyalty with one announcement. She answered that the removal was designed to weaken their public standing, because the titles had carried legitimacy, influence, and a permanent place in royal history. Then she discovered the decision went further. Palace records, future invitations, and ceremonial references would now use only their personal names. William had not written the final order, but he had shaped the moment. In a private recorded briefing to Charles, the prince warned that continued hesitation was harming Catherine, unsettling their children, and weakening the future stability of the monarchy. He had asked for protection, not revenge, yet the warning helped push his father toward the signature. Catherine found him standing alone before a family meeting. She asked whether he felt relieved. William admitted he wanted the crisis contained, not his brother destroyed. The future king had gained certainty, but no sense of victory. Then an advisor entered carrying a documented account of one private incident. He explained that neither the memoir, the interview, nor the documentary had finally broken Charles's resistance. Something else had happened. Something so personal that even Camilla stopped defending delay. And when that hidden incident was finally spoken aloud inside the palace, even those who had defended Harry understood why the king had stopped asking for more time. The public believed the final decision had been caused by years of accumulated bitterness. That was only partly true. Inside the palace, one recent incident had transformed frustration into certainty. It happened during a private royal commemoration where no cameras were expected, no controversy was invited, and every family member had been asked to respect a single boundary. By the end of that evening, Charles knew the arrangement could not survive. St. George's Hall had been chosen for a private memorial honoring the late Queen's service. The ceremony was restricted, meaning personal remarks and family conversations were not to be repeated outside the gathering. Charles had negotiated Harry's invitation himself, hoping one quiet evening might allow father and son to stand together without arguments, cameras, or public pressure. Harry waited until the memorial reception was nearly over. Then he approached the king and asked him to restore Meghan's ceremonial status and permit the Sussex titles to be used commercially without palace objection. A ceremonial status is an official place within royal events and public duties. Charles refused, warning that royal authority could not be carried into private business whenever it was useful. The tension hardened instantly. Harry told his father that the conversation, along with the palace's treatment of Meghan, might appear in a future public project. Charles placed his glass down and asked whether his son was threatening to expose a private exchange held beside his grandmother's memorial. Harry insisted he was demanding accountability. The king heard a warning. William stepped between them after hearing their voices rise. Harry accused his brother of controlling access to Charles and turning every private meeting into a test of loyalty. The prince answered that the night belonged to their grandmother, not another negotiation over status. Neither man moved closer. Neither backed down. Meghan waited outside the reception area and received a message saying the discussion had collapsed. She urged Harry not to leave without forcing a clear answer. He returned to the room carrying even more anger, and Charles understood that the boundary he had tried to protect was already breaking. Morning brought the betrayal. A media contact received a precise written account of the exchange, including words spoken near the memorial table. Only a handful of people knew them. Charles read the leaked account, circled one sentence, and summoned his constitutional secretary, the advisor responsible for guiding the sovereign through formal royal decisions. He made no direct accusation. He simply said the crown could no longer give authority to people who used private access as public leverage. The king ordered the title removal papers prepared, then demanded one final meeting with Harry alone. That last meeting was meant to offer Harry one final path away from humiliation, but instead, it became the most painful confrontation between father and son since the family first broke apart. There were no microphones, prepared statements, or palace aides inside the room. Only a father, who believed he had been pushed beyond endurance, and a son, who believed the family had already abandoned him. Charles had arranged the meeting to prevent the final punishment. Harry arrived determined not to surrender. Within minutes, the conversation ceased to be about titles and became a reckoning over grief, loyalty, marriage, and everything neither man could forgive. Charles chose a small sitting room at Clarence House because he wanted the meeting to feel personal, not constitutional. Clarence House is the King's London residence, used for private work and family meetings away from Buckingham Palace. Harry entered alone after being told Meghan could not attend. He saw the restriction as another attempt to isolate them. His father said the wound had begun between them and had to be faced without anyone speaking on their behalf. The king placed the unsigned order on the table. He offered one way to stop it. No more private royal conversations used in interviews, books, documentaries, speeches, or commercial projects. Harry called the demand forced silence. He said the family defended privacy only when exposure became painful, and insisted that his own life could not be controlled by palace permission. Charles stood so suddenly that the chair moved behind him. "Look at me as your father, not as the crown." Harry did not soften. He answered that the institution always entered the room before his father did. The words struck harder than anger. The king gripped the chair, sat down, and asked whether every act of protection would now be treated as betrayal. Harry accused William of turning Charles against him and allowing palace staff to treat Meghan as an enemy. The monarch rejected it. His elder son had not created the damage, he said. Repeated public attacks had endangered every relationship still standing. Charles tried once more. Harry and Meghan could retain the titles privately, but they would stop using them publicly. Harry refused because partial surrender would appear to confirm misuse. The king pulled the document toward himself. Harry stood and said there was nothing left to discuss. Only then did Charles sign. As his son reached the door, the monarch revealed that legal and constitutional authorities had already reviewed the removal. This was no longer one father's warning. The crown itself was prepared. Harry left believing his father had chosen William over him, but the machinery awaiting outside that room showed that the crown had prepared for a battle much larger than a family argument. Write a detailed script based on the outline provided for a royal monarchy documentary, using a bold, dramatic, and immersive storytelling approach. Tone and style: bold, cinematic, and suspenseful throughout. Narrative-driven, mystery, foreshadowing, emotional highs and lows. Never dry or biographical in style. No visual descriptions or scene directions. Mix short and long sentences to control pacing and enhance drama. Character rule: Every major character introduced in a section must appear at least twice within that section. Never introduce a character and abandon them before the section ends. Name repetition rule. Never use a character's full name or title more than once per paragraph. After the first mention, replace with pronouns or descriptive alternatives. For royal figures, use variations such as the Queen, she, her, the monarch, William, the prince, he, the future king, Sophie, she, the trusted confidant, Camilla, she, the queen consort, Charles, he, the king, the monarch. This rule applies to every character across every section without exception. Sourcing rule. When a character reveals or breaks silence, always specify how. A private interview, a documented account, a recorded conversation, even if fictional. Never leave a revelation sourceless. Terminology rule. When any royal title, document, ceremony, or institutional term appears for the first time, include one plain language explanation before continuing. Never assume audience familiarity with royal terminology. Critical. Terminology placement rule. Never place a terminology explanation in the first 3 sentences of any section. The opening must establish emotion and momentum first. Terminology explanations belong inside paragraph 2 or later, embedded naturally within context, never as an interruption to the dramatic opening. Wrong approach. It was a declaration that shook the monarchy. The future royal order meant the planned structure of roles and titles. Nothing would ever be the same. Correct approach. It was a declaration that shook the monarchy. Nothing would ever be the same. Charles understood what the future royal order, the planned structure of roles and titles defining the monarchy's next chapter, truly meant for everyone in that room. Context rule. Every section must contain at least 2 grounding details explaining why the moment matters, not just that it matters. Emotional stakes must be clear. Paragraph opening rule. No paragraph may open with a passive or explanatory construction. Every paragraph must begin with either a character in action or feeling something, a short punchy statement of consequence, a sensory or atmospheric detail that creates immediate tension. Wrong openings. A private palace briefing was supposed to be controlled, and that mattered because briefings are where the situation had developed over time, and it was important to understand. Royal tradition dictated that. Correct openings. Charles knew every person in that room understood the weight of what was coming. The closed door changed everything. Camilla did not move. She did not speak. Engagement rules. Use cliffhangers and foreshadowing to build suspense. No standalone endings. Every section must flow naturally into the next. Use bold dramatic phrasing at key moments. Contrast success with suffering where relevant to deepen emotional impact. Language. Simple but powerful word choices. Conversational and immersive tone. Never formal, academic, or stiff. Vivid through word choice alone. Never through visual instructions. Format. Paragraph format only. No bullet points, no headers, no numbered lists in output, no outline headings in the final script. Follow the exact word count specified in the outline for each section. Do not reset tone between sections. Carry narrative momentum forward. Each section must feel like a continuation, never a fresh start. Insert outline here. Section 6. The first doors close. Word count 445 words. Tone and style. Fast-moving, disorienting, emotionally bruising. Showing status, disappearing through immediate practical consequences. Hook. The loss did not arrive all at once. It appeared in small, unmistakable changes. A name altered on a website. An invitation quietly withdrawn. A scheduled introduction rewritten without warning. Each change carried the same message. The royal connection that Harry and Meghan had continued to carry across oceans was no longer theirs to command. What had begun as a signature in London was now reshaping their lives hour by hour. Key points. Context. Palace departments receive coordinated instructions to update official records, event protocols, websites, correspondence templates, and future ceremonial seating plans within 24 hours. Context. Organizations previously comfortable using the Sussex titles in promotional material begin asking whether the names can legally or ethically remain, creating immediate uncertainty around existing agreements and public appearances. Concrete reaction: Meghan opens a revised event announcement and sees herself introduced simply as Meghan Markle. She rereads the line, places her phone face down, and asks her team who authorized the change before being told that the organizers followed palace guidance. Emotional conflict. She views the revision as a calculated effort to diminish her achievements and detach her influence from royal history. Harry argues that reacting publicly too quickly could make them appear dependent on the very institution they rejected. Personal drama. Harry receives confirmation that an upcoming memorial invitation has been cancelled because attendance was linked to his former ceremonial position. He walks outside alone, struggling with the realization that the punishment affects access to family as much as status. Suspense/revelation. Their advisors warn that existing commercial contracts may contain valuation clauses tied to public identity and title recognition. The removal could trigger renegotiations, revised branding, or demands for clarification. Suspense/revelation. A palace courier delivers the written order to their legal representatives. Attached is a list of prohibited future uses, including letterheads, charitable promotions, public introductions, and commercial campaigns. Human anchor. Charles receives a report describing the first wave of consequences. He asks whether Harry's military associations are affected and looks relieved when told that personal service history will remain respected, even though official royal roles are gone. Forward hint. Harry initially prepares an angry public statement, but before releasing it, he asks Meghan to speak with him privately, without advisors, for a conversation that changes the direction of their response. Transition line. For the first time since the crisis began, Harry and Meghan were no longer deciding how to fight the palace. They were deciding whether the battle had already cost them too much. The loss did not arrive all at once. It appeared in small, unmistakable changes. A name altered on a website, an invitation quietly withdrawn, a scheduled introduction rewritten without warning. Each change carried the same message. The royal connection that Harry and Meghan had continued to carry across oceans was no longer theirs to command. What had begun as a signature in London was now reshaping their lives hour by hour. Palace departments moved with ruthless speed. Within 24 hours, official records, event protocols, websites, correspondence templates, and future seating plans were rewritten. A ceremonial seating plan is the formal order deciding where royals sit at state occasions, and removing someone from it signals that their public role has ended. Organizations using the Sussex titles in promotions immediately began asking whether those names could remain. Meghan opened a revised announcement for an upcoming event and saw only Meghan Markle. She read it twice, placed her phone face down, and asked who had approved the change. Her team explained that the organizers had followed palace guidance. She called it deliberate humiliation, an attempt to separate her influence from royal history and reduce years of work to a name stripped of status. Harry urged restraint. He warned that reacting too quickly would make them appear dependent on the institution they had rejected. Yet his own control shattered when confirmation arrived that a memorial invitation had been cancelled because attendance was tied to his former ceremonial position. He stepped outside alone, realizing the punishment was closing family doors as well as public ones. Their advisors delivered another blow. Several commercial contracts contained valuation clauses, terms allowing agreements to be reviewed when a public identity loses market value. Branding could change. Payments could be renegotiated. Partners could demand answers. A palace courier then delivered the written order to their legal representatives. Attached was a list banning future use of the titles on letterheads, charitable promotions, public introductions, and commercial campaigns. Meghan studied every restriction. Harry read the list beside her, growing quieter with each line. Charles received a report describing the first consequences, and immediately asked whether Harry's military associations had been erased. The king relaxed only when told that his son's service history would remain respected, even though every official royal role was gone. His relief exposed the wound beneath the decision. He still wanted part of Harry protected. Harry began drafting an angry statement, filling it with accusations of cruelty and revenge. Then he stopped, looked toward Meghan, and asked everyone else to leave. For the first time since the crisis began, Harry and Meghan were no longer deciding how to fight the palace. They were deciding whether the battle had already cost them too much. The loudest royal battles often turn in the quietest rooms. That night, there were no communications advisors shaping language, and no cameras waiting for a reaction. Harry and Meghan sat opposite each other as husband and wife, stripped of the titles that had followed them through every triumph and controversy. For the first time, they were forced to ask whether those names had protected their independence, or prevented them from ever fully achieving it. Harry stared at the statement glowing on the screen. It accused the palace of cruelty, constitutional overreach, and using royal titles as weapons. Constitutional overreach meant pushing royal authority beyond what was fair or necessary. Meghan had supported a strong response at first, but another public attack could make Charles's decision look justified, rather than vindictive. Their advisors had urged immediate legal resistance before leaving the room. A constitutional challenge would formally dispute whether the crown had used its powers properly, yet neither Harry nor Meghan believed a long fight would restore their standing. It might only expose how much they still needed recognition from the institution they had condemned. Meghan broke the silence. She asked whether he wanted the title because it belonged to him, or because losing it felt like losing his mother, his childhood, and his place inside the family. Harry looked away. Her question reached beneath the anger and touched the fear he had refused to name. Harry admitted that Duke of Sussex had become proof he was not completely cast out. Without it, he feared becoming a visitor to his own history, remembered by the monarchy but no longer allowed to stand within it. Meghan listened, then confessed that she had built part of their new identity around proving the title could survive beyond palace control. Its removal felt like a judgment on everything they had tried to create. The choice changed everything. Harry returned to the statement and deleted the harshest paragraphs. He would criticize the manner of the decision, but he would not release more private accusations or threaten immediate legal action. Meghan agreed. Clinging publicly to the titles, she said, would make their future appear dependent on royal approval. Harry closed the laptop, lifted an embossed Sussex folder from the desk, and placed it inside a drawer. The gesture did not mean forgiveness. It meant fury would no longer be allowed to decide what came next. Their restrained reply reached London before dawn, surprising Charles and denying the palace retaliation it expected. By sunrise, the private pain of one family had become a national spectacle, and a single image outside Buckingham Palace captured the verdict of the public more powerfully than any official statement. The announcement spread across Britain before dawn, turning a private family rupture into the defining royal story of the year. Newspapers printed language once considered unthinkable. Broadcasters interrupted regular programming. Crowds gathered beneath palace gates, some praising the king's resolve, and others condemning an act they believed had permanently divided his family. By breakfast, the Sussex titles had become more than names. They had become a national argument about loyalty and consequence. Britain woke to a verdict. Major broadcasters called the decision the harshest action taken against a senior-born royal in the modern era, stressing that Charles had personally approved the permanent withdrawal. A permanent withdrawal meant the titles were not suspended for a season or paused during negotiations. They were removed with no planned return. Palace staff answered every question with the same written announcement and refused to discuss private exchanges involving the King, Harry, William, or Meghan. The London Chronicle captured the shock in black and gold. Its front page screamed, "No more Duke and Duchess," above two separate images. Charles leaving Clarence House alone, and Harry arriving at a California event with his head lowered. The paper's framing turned a constitutional decision into a family fracture that millions could understand instantly. Outside Buckingham Palace, a crowd gathered around a handwritten sign pressed against the railings. A crown must have boundaries. Nearby, another visitor left flowers with a note asking Charles not to forget that Harry was still his son. Supporters praised the monarch for defending the institution. Critics argued that he had made reconciliation almost impossible. Charles watched the morning broadcast with the sound lowered. When the presenter called it the final break with his younger son, the king turned away and asked his private secretary to switch off the television. He had gained control of the crisis, yet the victory felt like grief. Harry and Meghan then released a restrained written statement acknowledging the decision without using their former titles. Their silence on private details surprised commentators and denied the palace the counterattack many had expected. William responded by instructing senior staff not to celebrate. Catherine supported him privately, warning that triumph would turn protection into humiliation. The prince accepted her warning without argument, and she reminded him that dignity mattered most when power had won. The noise slowly began to settle, but one question remained inside the palace. Charles had protected the crown. He still had to decide whether the price was accepting that Harry might never return to him as a son. The nation saw a monarch drawing a boundary, but behind the palace walls, Charles was left to measure that boundary against the empty place where his son once stood. When the noise faded, the meaning of the decision became painfully clear. Charles had preserved the authority of the crown, but he had done so by surrendering the last illusion that titles could hold his fractured family together. Harry and Meghan lost the royal identities they had carried into a new life. William inherited a more stable institution and deeper distance from his brother. No one emerged untouched, and no one could return to what existed before. Charles returned to the council chamber, where the order had been signed. Every paper had been removed, yet the pen remained on the table. Official records now named Harry and Meghan without active royal titles. Ceremonial plans no longer treated them as representatives, and future ventures could not use the former styling. A royal styling is the formal name and rank recognized by the crown, and losing it meant losing the authority attached to that identity. The king picked up the pen and held it briefly. Then he placed it inside a drawer instead of displaying it as a symbol of victory. Charles accepted that the decision had been necessary, but he refused to pretend it was painless. He instructed his staff that Harry must never be mocked, erased, or treated as though he had never belonged. Authority had been removed. Blood had not. Harry faced the new reality in California. At a charitable meeting, he introduced himself without any royal styling. His voice tightened, but he continued. The moment forced him to accept that his future reputation would depend on his actions, not inherited rank. Meghan made her own choice. She directed her team to remove title-centered branding from future projects, determined to prove her influence could survive without palace symbolism before the world. William understood the cost more clearly than anyone. He told Catherine that the crown had been protected, but no one had won. The prince insisted that George must inherit a monarchy where family disputes were confronted early, before silence hardened into public war. Catherine agreed, reminding him that George also deserved a family not ruled by inherited resentment. The decision neither destroyed Harry and Meghan nor healed the royal family. It ended the dangerous middle ground in which they lived outside the monarchy while still drawing power from its titles. The titles were gone, the boundary was permanent, and the monarchy moved forward, not because the family had healed, but because King Charles had finally accepted that the crown could no longer be protected by avoiding the pain of a final decision. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.